Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for tuning in and listening to not just my presentation, but also to the presentations of everyone else who presented yesterday and also today. These are challenging circumstances and they've been hard on everyone. I'm hoping that this conference can be a bright spot in that, but I also want to acknowledge that I'm recording this presentation in mid-October, and there's no easy way to really predict what life will look like by the time the DLF rolls around. With that in mind, my name is Isaac Williams, and I'm the Data Visualization and GIS Librarian at the University of Texas at Arlington. Today, I want to use my time with you to talk about something that's important to me and something that has come up a lot during my time as a data librarian, which is the idea or movement of data justice and how we can incorporate that into library instruction. So to start off with, I want to talk a little bit about the context of this presentation. To begin with, there's the phenomenon that data science is a popular field and a popular method in both research and in the private sector, in academia and not. Data scientists positions in the tech industry pay well, and data science has become a field that a lot of students are interested in contributing to for one reason or another. In response to this growing need for data science support, basically caused by an influx of students who really want to learn these skills, and the growth of academic departments dedicated to data science or computer engineering, academic libraries are being asked to teach workshops and to provide other kinds of teaching and research support for data-driven research. This can include things like data management assistance, working on data management plans, doing consultations, workshops, or hosting online instructional content for students and faculty. Sometimes libraries create entire departments to fulfill these needs. As an example, I'm currently situated in the Research Data Services Department at UT Arlington. In the department that I'm in has a director of research data services, a data management librarian, a data visualization and GIS librarian, which is me, as well as a graduate research assistant. That being said, there are sometimes going to be data librarians who are working on their own and aren't necessarily part of an already predefined research data services department or data services department in your library. Of course, academia is not an island and we're situated in the broader world. So part of this context includes, some of the discussions that have been happening lately. In the United States, for example, there's been increased attention paid to how technology impacts society. Some of this attention comes from academic researchers, which includes people like Rua Benjamin, Sophia Noble, Catherine D'Ignazio, Lauren Klein, and Sarah Roberts. These researchers, as well as other scholars, again, both in academia and not, have studied the ways that technology, which also includes data science, increases inequality. At the same time, computer science, engineering, and even data science departments are growing. And few have courses that explicitly focus on the ways that students' code and products might impact society, or ways that they can really sort of create technology that is more empowering than disempowering. So the question then becomes, what does this mean for academic libraries? After all, why am I talking about this at a library conference? I think that all of the factors I just described present libraries with an opportunity to shift the state of data science education, at least when it comes to the data science workshops that we teach in libraries. Before I get into the details of how to teach data justice and some specific ways that you can include this in your instruction, I want to bring up an important distinction made by Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren F. Klein in their book, Data Feminism. Data Feminism is an important book. It's one that's had a big impact on me. And one of the many things that it does well is describe the difference between data ethics and data justice. The book basically holds that data ethics secure power, while data justice is a concept designed explicitly to challenge power. As you can see in the table up on the screen, some of the terms that are commonly used when talking about the social impact of data, like ethics, bias, fairness, and accountability, as well as transparency, locate the source of problems in individuals or in technical systems when the problems are really rooted in structural power differentials. Basically the idea is that this inequality is not caused by just a bad line of code or a product that is missing a few key components, but on a broader level, it's really impacted by existing sources of oppression, and the technology really just mirrors that. So instead, instead of operating from a framework of data ethics, where we just need to make these technologies a bit more transparent, or we just need to be a little bit more open about how they're made, Klein and D'Ignazio argue that we should operate from a data justice framework, which swaps out these terms for words like justice, oppression, equity, and co-liberation, which really highlight sort of the idea that this is another manifestation of existing oppression, and it will take some deeper effort to really untangle and unwork. So I bring this up to provide context for why I'm calling it data justice and not data ethics, as well as to emphasize that the problems I'm describing and that are being studied by a lot of these researchers are not the result of a few bad apples, but instead just a rotten structure and a rotten framework. This is also why I think that changing instruction to include these concepts is so important. So there are a few different ways that you can bring these concepts into your teaching, and I'll go more into detail about these in the upcoming slides. But first, they're teaching a dedicated workshop or an entire workshop focused on data justice or the social impacts of technologies. You can also teach, some of these concepts inside more traditional skills-based workshops. Say, for example, a workshop about data visualization or data cleaning. Another idea is inviting guest speakers to come to campus and talk about their research or their experiences working towards data justice. Of course, guest speakers like this, this might take place over Zoom for, the foreseeable future. Finally, there are also experiential learning opportunities, which include things like hackathons, datathons, and more. So teaching a dedicated workshop is one of your options, and it certainly has its benefits. It allows for more in-depth exploration of concepts and skills. You could teach a workshop on, for example, data justice and data visualization, or on some of the ethical considerations of cleaning data. One thing to consider, however, is that these kinds of workshops are going to attract participants who are already interested in what you're covering. This can be helpful because it means that the people in attendance will likely be invested in learning, and they'll likely be receptive to changing their minds or challenging any preconceived notions that they have about data. At the same time, it also means that your workshop might not reach people who either aren't interested in what you're covering or who just aren't aware that some of these problems even exist. Which brings me into sort of the next type of workshop that you can have, which is one where you integrate data justice concepts into more of a traditional skills-based workshop. Say, for example, a workshop on OpenRefine, a workshop on Python, the kinds of workshops that data services departments and that data librarians already teach. This means that you're going to have less time to focus on justice itself. You're going to have to basically weave it into what you're already teaching. But at the same time, it means that you'll be reaching participants who might not otherwise learn about the social impacts of data practices. And you might actually be introducing these concepts to someone who's never heard of them before. It also supports the general mission of making data justice an essential part of data education. Not an extracurricular or an elective, but something that's actually foundational to working with data is, learning what impact it has on the world around you. And ultimately, this supports the goal also that, data justice will hopefully not always be taught by librarians, but will also be incorporated into data science curricula and, taught by faculty as just a matter of, getting your degree. Next, I want to talk about bringing guest speakers to campus. Guest lectures can be helpful because students can learn from people who have invested significant amounts of their lives and basically their life's work into data justice. Some speakers might include scholars and researchers, including perhaps some of the researchers I mentioned before. You might also invite activists and ethicists to come and talk about their work. It's important to understand that, people who work in data justice and people who work in sort of understanding the social implications of technology, they're not always in academia. They might be community organizers, activists, ethicists. There's a wide breadth of people who are working on this, and you have really interesting and engaging things to say. This route, of inviting a guest speaker to campus allows participants to learn about the broader data justice ecosystem, learning who's out there, who's doing work, who they might be interested in reading or learning from further. And it might also introduce them to potential careers in tech ethics. Maybe they're not aware that you can have a job that does this, or you can research this, or, you can, outside of being paid for your work, you can organize around this. You can work with other people to make this better. So it can be very helpful for students in that way. Finally, there's experiential learning, which includes things like datathons and hackathons. At my library, for example, we host an Open Data Day hackathon where students create apps that are supposed to be used for the public good using open data. During last year's hackathon, we actually had a lot of people who made COVID tracking apps and basically apps that were used, that were created using public data that are not intended to be monetized, but just are intended to be a good social service. This type of experiential learning, can also be applied to data justice. I can see similar sort of datathons or hackathons being done about this. Like in this scenario, students would work with data directly, and they can see how data justice impact the development process. So basically, they would learn how, it's kind of one thing to take a workshop that talks about how data justice is something that's worth pursuing and that provides some tactics for working towards it. But it's another thing to have a hands-on experience where you really learn how to incorporate this into the work that you're making, into the code that you're writing, and into the apps that you're developing. As a benefit, also, students can add these projects that they work on to their portfolios or to their CVs, which might encourage them to participate, especially if they are sort of graduating students or they're looking for positions. So I want to conclude by providing a list with some further reading suggestions, because this presentation is not at all comprehensive of a lot of the discussions happening around data justice. The first book is Data Feminism by Lauren F. Klein and Catherine D'Ignacio, which I mentioned a lot here, and also tend to mention during other talks that I've had. There's also Race After Technology by Rura Benjamin, Algorithms of Oppression by Sophia Noble, Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill, Artificial Unintelligence by Meredith Broussard, and Automating Inequality by Virginia Eubanks. So this is, if you're interested in learning more, these are some good places to start. I think that they're all fairly user-friendly, beginner-friendly, and they have a lot of really important things to say, things that, have helped me to learn a lot more about all this. So just to wrap up, I want to say thank you again for having me. Thank you for listening. I really appreciated the time that I've been given here to talk about something that matters a lot to me. Again, my name is Isaac Williams, the Data Visualization and GIS Librarian at UT Arlington. There's my Twitter handle, my website, in case you want to get in touch. Thank you so much.